Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootleggers, shield teslators, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks. I'm Useful Idiot, and I decided to do a bonus video. So now instead of 3, there's going to be 4 in my series of basically domestic issues and financial issues, which usually only garner about 30 or 40 views. So this is a bonus video for all of you diehards that actually watch my financial videos. And this one was inspired because I did a video about gigantic corporate tax breaks being given for repatriating offshore money in the United States. And one of my regulars, and I love you, man, but commented about the fact that a lot of corporations pay zero taxes anyway, so it's a moot point, which I brought up in that video about 3 or 4 times. But it did inspire me to want to go back to that issue and bring up that point because I don't think it can be said enough. And perhaps that was why it didn't make a bigger impression in that video, because I should have emphasized it more, because it is very important that there's all this crying and whining about the high corporate tax rate in the United States. And every time we hear all these State of the Union addresses and all these corporate screwheads get up there, they always complain that we're not competitive because there's lower tax rates all over the world, and that's why they have to go to places like Ireland and Barbados. And but anyway, the fact is, arguing about a 35% corporate tax rate is misleading, because most companies, if you look at corporate culture, most companies that actually pay taxes end up paying around 20%, and generally far less than that. One of the things I found interesting about doing research for this particular video is that not only are there tons of links about corporations avoid paying taxes, but you'd think that some of these lists would overlap more. But every time you go to a different article, there's a whole new list of a whole new bunch of corporations that are paying zero taxes. So by the time you finish going through 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 links, you see a list that's so long you can't imagine that any corporations in America are paying any taxes at all. And in that, we kind of get a little closer to the truth. Here's a good example. I looked up a first one, a 2015 report, and it's from the Citizens for Tax Justice, and they had a list of 15 S&P companies who paid zero taxes last year, and they paid no taxes on $23 billion in profits in 2014, and all but 2 of these companies actually got rebates. And this list has CBS, GE, Interpublic Group, JetBlue Airways, Mattel, Owens Corning, PG&E, Pepco Holdings, Priceline.com, Prudential Financial, Qualcomm, Ryder System, Time Warner, Weyerhaeuser, and Xerox. So first thing that's striking is that, wow, look at all that. They're some of the most biggest companies, the most profitable companies, the most successful companies, and companies that have been around for a long time. So very telling that these very successful companies are able to pay zero taxes. And then, then I went to another list, and it had 26 companies that had paid no income taxes. And I was surprised that of all the ones on the list that didn't overlap with that other list. And this includes NiSource, Wisconsin Energy, CenterPoint Energy, Integris Energy Group, Atmos Energy, Tenet Healthcare, American Electric Power, Conway, Duke Energy, Apache, Verizon, CMS Energy, Consolidated Edison, and Boeing. Once again, we were struck by the fact that there's no repetition between this and the other list I read off. And once again, some of the biggest companies in the world, including Boeing, that are paying no taxes whatsoever. And you look a little closer, it gets even more egregious, because you go to another list, 27 companies that paid no taxes in 2015. And once again, there's hardly any overlap with the list that I just read off. And this one includes American Airlines, United Continental, Hewlett-Packard, and E-Trade. And once again, hundreds of millions of dollars in profits, and yet all these companies got tax credits or refunds. GM alone had $700 billion in pre-tax profits, and yet got a rebate. And then we have another list from S&P 500 corporations that don't pay taxes from another list. And once again, none of these overlap with the other lists I read off. Goodyear, TE Connectivity, Eaton Corporation, Tyco International, Mascow Corporation, Royal Caribbean Cruises, Wynn Resorts, Level 3 Communicate, First Energy Corporation, and Cabot Oil and Gas Company. So you see these lists and you hear these companies listed off, and all these huge and medium-sized corporations paying no taxes. And as the list grows longer and longer and longer, once again, you have to ask yourself, well, if all these companies are not paying any taxes, who are paying these taxes? And who are all these companies that complain about all the corporate tax rates when they're either not paying any taxes at all, they're paying almost half of what the corporate tax rate is, or they actually get refunds and they get rebates. And a lot of times it can be a pretty sizable chunk of money. CBS, for example, had $1.8 billion in profits in 2014, and they actually got paid a rebate, tax refund of $235 million from the United States government. Mattel paid zero income tax for the last 5 years, and they got a $46 million tax rebate. And that's one of the other things. These lists I'm reading off only cover like the last year or two, and as you go further back, of course, this is repeated over and over and over again, and it's probably goes back as far as records have been kept by human beings walking upright, because you go even just back to the 2008 to 2012 period. Once again, the Citizens for Tax Justice did this amazing report, and I'll put it actually in the links below, as well as in the comment section, because I think everybody really who is interested in this should take a look at this study they did. And it also has a lot of associated articles that are also fascinating on this exact same topic. But even then, the 2008 to 2012 period preceding the last couple of years I've just been talking about, said as a group of 288 corporations, they paid an effective tax rate of 20%. But that's misleading, because 111 of those companies paid zero taxes. So in other words, that 20% tax rate is weighted heavily to the bottom favored industries. In fact, 26 of those corporations got rebates. And I find it interesting that they talk about 26 corporations that got rebates, because if you go back through a lot of these lists, you find out that it's the same 20 top 25 or companies, 25, 26 companies that regularly claim more tax breaks. And in fact, that top 25 claims more tax breaks than the combined 263. So that tells us a lot. And in fact, this study goes on to reveal other details that tell us even more. For example, they reiterate that companies like Boeing, GE, Priceline, and Verizon, Wells Fargo, AT&T, IBM, all those same companies that were paying zero tax rates for the previous 5 years are the same giant corporations that I was just talking about over the last 3 years that were paying no taxes. And like I say, you could go back previous to the 5-year period before 2008 and you find the same. And I'm sure if you go back a couple of decades, you will find the same. A lot of these major corporations, particularly in this age of deregulation, there's probably a bump during the Reagan administration, probably a bump during the Clinton administration, and a few more hefty bumps during the Bush and Obama administrations. And I thought one of the things that was probably the most revealing in this study, and why I encourage everyone to check it out, is some of the details they gave about the sectors with the lowest tax rates. And I really found that really interesting about how it shows who is valued the most in corporate government, in the corporate government relationship. So the sectors with the lowest rates are utilities, have a 3% tax rate, industrial machinery gets a 4% tax rate, telecommunications has a 10% tax rate, oil, gas, and pipelines have a 14% tax rate, transportation has a 16% tax rate, aerospace and defense have a 16% tax rate, and financial has a 19% tax rate. And I think it's telling that the defense and financial industries, which are known to fatten up everything and dumble, and are ripe for financial, how do you put it, manipulation. Obviously, the defense budget is really fat and manipulated, and plus the dark funds. So anyway, the government putting a 16% tax rate on that is like paying itself. And the same thing with the financial sector. They don't mind having a tax rate of 20% from the banks because of this symbiotic relationship with the government and the military-industrial complex. So no surprise there. And then, of course, all the other industries, transportation, oil, gas, of course, get a sweet rate. And we know why that is, because, once again, that comfortable relationship between the government and the oil and gas companies and these giant subsidies. And then telecommunications, of course, would get a 10% tax rate because they're helping the government spy on the entire globe. And utilities, industrial machinery get the sweet deal so they can keep the wheels of industry running, including the government. But when you get to the bottom line about this, it's all legal at this point, regardless of all the discussion we've heard. And the way these tax rates are driven down is accelerated depreciation breaks that have been given to the corporations. Executive stock options are write-offs. Research and developments are write-offs, which is particularly interesting that research and development write-offs are going on when those departments in a lot of these corporations are being dialed back in order to finance these buybacks. But still, they can use them for massive tax write-offs. And then, of course, the traditional way, just keeping offshore accounts and keeping overseas profits overseas and not reintegrating them in the United States. And what are the excuses that we always get from the corporations on this? I thought one of these articles had a great list. We hear the same thing over and over. One, we are simply following the rules. And two, it's not fair to look at federal taxes, point to other taxes, claiming that local taxes and energy taxes and all these fees are where people should be looking. But of course, those taxes would amount to something, but wouldn't compare to, say, a 35% corporate tax rate that they always cry about. Then number three, of course, is they always say we're investing in America, and anybody that's paying any attention whatsoever pretty much knows that's bullshit. And then the best one, number four, we'll pay our taxes later. And later could be a mighty long time because they can defer longer than most humans live. So there it is. Corporations always whining and moaning about the corporate tax rate in the United States, and it's just cry wolf because most of them either do not pay anything close to that, pay half of that, pay none of that, or even get refunds. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.